Kind of going back to the way that most enterprise software contracts were established in that time frame, is there were separate contracts for the right to use the software and for the ongoing maintenance of the software. And the right to use the software was a perpetual license. So you paid for it once, like you bought your car. You weren't leasing it, you bought it outright. You had the title to it. You bought the right to use your license into perpetuity. And then every year you had the opportunity to subscribe to annual support and maintenance from the vendor. And typically, it was priced at somewhere around 20, 22, 23% of what the perpetual license cost was. So it wasn't an insignificant expense. And it's really necessary for an enterprise of any size to have that maintenance and support for a couple of reasons, for several reasons. One, this is, it's really the core digital heartbeat of your company. It's where you're operating to get things done in the company and recording those transactions and reporting on those transactions. It's the way that we keep records for our businesses. And as part of that, it was important for clients to remain number one, secure. They had to know that their data and their systems were secure, so that today, tomorrow, etc., they were going to be working and there wasn't going to be any kind of breach. So it's important to have it secured. It's important to have it stable. It's working. I got people on the shop floor. I got people in the field. I need to make sure that software is stable and working and doing the job I need it to do. It needs to be performant, and it needs to be compliant with whatever the regulations are, tax, legal, regulatory compliance in the jurisdictions in which my company is operating. So that was all part of the maintenance agreement. The vendor would provide patches for known vulnerabilities in the security space. They would provide tax, legal, and regulatory updates as needed, particularly in the areas of finance and human capital management, human resources. Payroll is where those tax, legal, and regulatory issues came up. E-invoicing in many, many countries is a regulatory requirement. And so Rimini Street said, we understand all of that. And what's important to clients to keep their software stable, secure, performant, and compliant. But the software vendors were charging a lot of money for that. And our founder felt that the delivery of that service experience when something goes wrong was subpar, and that there was an opportunity to provide a higher level of service and a broader level of service with a more responsive model. So Rimini Street started with offering that same annual software support at up to 50% off what the vendor was charging. But what came with that was a more responsive kind of a support experience, direct access to engineers who could help resolve issues, as well as security solutions that would help proactively mitigate risk, interoperability solutions that could help the software continue to operate in environments for many years, and tax, legal, and regulatory updates to make sure to help our clients remain compliant. And it was really that cost and the service experience that were driving it. But there was one more thing, and that was freedom in a roadmap perspective. So you've mentioned already, and Marcus has mentioned, that SAP imposes deadlines on support. And that was happening all across the industry. Vendors typically would only want to provide support services for the latest release, or one back or two back, kind of that. It's a rolling support deadline. And SAP is still doing that. And we believe, and I think most of the practitioners believe, that the life and value of enterprise software is a lot longer than the vendors are willing to support. So this need to upgrade just to remain supported was completely artificial from our perspective. And we wanted to give our clients a much longer roadmap on the software that was already working and had no really material reason to change. And so at the very beginning, we said, we'll not only do those things I just mentioned, but we'll also support your existing release for up to 15 years or more. And then you can move forward on your timetable.
Yeah, it's really interesting, fascinating, and it's funny because you talk about this and it sounds so innovative on one hand, but on the other hand, you're like, it just makes sense. It's kind of a no-brainer. Like, why would you not have other options to provide that sort of third-party alternative? I want to ask you a follow-up question to that, Marcus, here in a moment, but want to just get to the audience real quickly. Steve Perry confirms that he is not with Journey, unfortunately. But thank you for being here anyway, Steve. I really do appreciate having you here. So he is not here. We have someone joining from Belgium and others joining as well. So thank you for that. I want to ask the audience a quick question before I ask Marcus this next one. But I want to hear from the audience, even though we're early in this conversation. Just give me a yes or no. Do you think customers should have the right to go outside of their core software vendor to get third-party maintenance? Just give me a yes or no. I'm just curious to get a knee-jerk reaction from you so far, knowing that we're going to dive into this more, and you may or may not change your opinion after this, but we'd love to get your feedback. So let us know what you think in the comments, wherever you're watching today. But Marcus, I want to get back to something that Scott just said and then something you said and bring it together. I'm playing devil's advocate here. So you made the comment earlier that a lot of times vendors will, and one of the allegations here from the EU is that SAP is putting in contracts or language in their contracts that state you cannot go get third-party maintenance and support. You can't use a third party. In some cases, they have language like that, I think is what you said. There's also another piece of this too, which is around, just lost my train of thought. It was around the back penalties. So if for some reason someone said, I'm going to cancel my SAP maintenance through SAP for 2 years, let's say, and I decide I'm going to go to Rimini Street, and then for some reason I decide, you know what, I'm going to stop at Rimini Street and go back to SAP for whatever reason. Because again, I have freedom of choice, right? So I might go back to SAP. What SAP is doing is saying, okay, that's great, you can come back, but you need to pay us for those 2 years you didn't pay us, that you were paying Rimini Street. So that's another piece of the anti-competitive allegation that they're making. But to play devil's advocate, you mentioned it, that in the contract, there's oftentimes language that supports their right to do that. So I guess the question is, even if something is super sketchy and weird and unethical, but you agree to it in a contract, what does that mean to a buyer? Is that something you should just be like, oh, it's no big deal because it's unethical, so it'll get thrown out of court? Or should you say, I'm going to push back on this and I'm going to get that struck from the contract if I can? And what if they won't remove it from the contract? Just help us unpack that a bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Well, that's a very bad strategy for anybody negotiating a contract, is to agree to something and then say, well, it's not going to be enforceable because it's unethical. That is a recipe for disaster. But let's be clear about what SAP is specifically doing, because I'm not sure I was clear. There is not an express prohibition, as far as I know, and certainly not in the contracts that I have seen, that just outright prevents you from using a third party for support. Okay, that would be clearly.
That's really important. I want to make sure, because I misspoke then, if that's what you're saying, because I wasn't aware of that. So it sort of actually fits better than what I was thinking, is that I didn't know they had that clause in their contract. So it sounds like maybe they don't necessarily.
Right. And one of the users here, or viewers, Ramakrishna, asked this question. So, well, we've always used third-party support. I never knew this was prohibited. And it's not necessarily prohibited. And that's where the EU is coming in. And they're saying, okay, well, these practices are anti-competitive. And what are the practices? And one of them is just what you said. It's charging a high reinstatement and back maintenance fees when the customer comes back.